I'm about to tell you a secret. This is a story that is about me that I have never publicly shared in its entirety, and I'm about to reveal it. And this is honestly super vulnerable for me, so I hope it inspires and I hope it helps you out. So as you can see, I'm in a very different setting right now. I'm actually in Las Vegas right now shooting for MGM Resorts, which is absolutely amazing. We're actually about to head out on a road trip through Zion. But the reason I say this is because this story is about how I went from being almost homeless to working for 5-star resorts like this one behind me. And it's a wild story, and I hope you're ready for it. Here we go. So the story actually starts way before I was almost homeless. It actually starts when I was 8 years old. When I was 8 years old, I started using my parents' dad cam. And this camera was not great quality. It was like the VCR tape, but I loved it. And I was constantly filming videos, filming little stories, little home movies. I remember at one point, instead of doing a book report, I actually did a video as my book report. And this was far before social media was even a thing. And I was creating these videos just because I liked them. And I remember I would kind of like get my siblings on board, I'd get my friends on board, and I was a terrible director. I was super bossy. No one really liked working for me. So I'd bribe them and I'd say like, hey, I'll buy you an ice cream, or I'll buy you a game or something if you'll help act in my movie. And just like throughout my childhood, I have all these memories of doing that. Well, fast forward to high school, I started taking like a video production class. And at this point I was getting more attuned with how to do things like editing and just like cinematography in general, to the point where I was starting to showcase some of my skills, and I actually won some awards. I did a video for a hospital my senior year of high school that actually won my school like $2,500 or something like that. So not a huge amount of money, but it was really cool, and it was kind of validating for me to be like, wow, I can actually maybe make a living doing this. And it was at that point, I mean, my entire life before, I was like, I really want to be a movie director. But at that point, I was like, I can actually do this. Like, this is a legitimate career path that I can follow. And just to give you a little bit of context, I went to a school that was pretty small. There was about 500 kids in the school. I was one of 2 people that went out of state for college, and no one else, to my knowledge, was doing anything that was in the art realm at all. Like most people at that time, again, this is pre-social media, most people didn't see videography or filmmaking as a viable career. They thought it was like a cool hobby, but they didn't think you could actually make any money at it. So it was actually, with the exception of my parents and like a few of my friends, like a lot of people didn't think that it was a legitimate career path. It was really a lot of, my parents supporting me, number one, but also me just being like, I'm gonna go for it and I'm gonna do it, and I don't know how it's gonna work out, but I'm gonna try. I ended up going to film school.
We are out here location scouting in downtown Lynchburg, VA. Was Jamie, Eli, and Dan over here.
I go to this college in Virginia called Liberty University, it was a 4-year program, but only 2 of it was for film school. It was a great program, got to meet a lot of people throughout it, a lot of connections, and I got my first film jobs actually as a result. I actually left school early to go work on a movie in Memphis, and then drove back like 10 hours from Memphis all the way back to Virginia just to graduate, stayed there for like 10 hours just to walk across the stage, and then drove back to work on this movie in Memphis. And I learned a ton of stuff there about lighting, cinematography, all that kind of stuff. We ended up even going to LA, doing all kinds of stuff like blowing up cars. We did some gunfight scenes. We actually shot on the same studio set that they did American Sniper, which is super dope. But I started to get my first taste of what it felt to work on a movie. Now, caveat to that was I was getting paid $35 a day because that was my per diem. I didn't get any payment. I was working for free. Luckily, I had a place to stay that was free, which was super helpful, and I got free food on set. But in terms of actually making money, it was just not there at all. After that, I immediately get a call to be on another movie. This movie was actually in Arkansas, and I flew over to be on that. Now that movie, I was getting paid about $150 a day, which still is not insane. Like, it's okay, but keep in mind you're working 12 to 14-hour days. And I was just kind of like getting the skills, kind of learning the ropes a little bit, and trying out some different positions on the movie set. And at this point, I still wanted to be a movie director. That was kind of the path I was heading towards. So I do that whole movie, I make a few $1,000s, and at this point I'm like, okay, what do? I can wait for another call for a movie, or I can like try to do something on my own. I don't really know what's going on. So long story short, back on the movie that I did in LA, I had made a call to the assistant director of a show called Hawaii Five-0, and the call never really went through, it never really went anywhere, but he had my contact, and that's pretty much all that happened as a result. Well, I'm sitting in my house a day in August, and I had just gotten an opportunity to work on like Step Up 6 or whatever the new one was at that time. I was going to make $400 a day. I was going to be an electric. I was going to be a big time movie. It was going to be in Atlanta. It was going to be awesome. Like basically me living my dream working on a movie. And then I get a call from an 808 number. And the only reason I knew 808 is because a buddy of mine in school had an 808 number and I knew it was from Hawaii. So I answered the phone and I'm like, hey, this is Nash. And they're like, hey, Nash, we need some PAs to be on set on Friday. This was a Tuesday. Are you on island? And I was like, absolutely, I'm on island. Turns out I wasn't. I was actually sitting in my parents' house in Georgia at the time. But of course, I said that I was on island. And they're like, cool, can you be here Friday, 6 a.m.? We got a shoot. We can have you on. I was like, yeah, absolutely. The phone call lasted about 45 seconds. I hung up and I was like, oh crap, I just committed to going to Hawaii. I've never been to Hawaii in my life. I know nothing about it. I know no one who lives there. And I need to be there in 3 days. So I need to figure out what the heck is going on. Plus, I only had 1 day guaranteed. They didn't guarantee me like weeks or months of work. It was literally just 1 day. But it was one of those things that I just kind of had to take the leap of faith and be like, okay, I hope this works out kind of thing. So I ended up doing it. Well, over the course of those 3 days, I was scrambling. I was trying to figure out where I was going to stay, what even Oahu was. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anyone who lived there. But what I did know is that a buddy of mine, Daniel, actually also had an opportunity to work on this show. And he was actually working on another show as well. And he was moving out a few days before I was. I was like, sick, maybe I can call him up and see where he's staying. Well, it turns out he was staying at a church. And I was kind of emailing a bunch of different churches, saying like, hey, would you let me stay for a week or a few days or whatever, just so I can get on my feet. And I didn't really get a whole lot of leads there, but he happened to be staying at this church that was like a family friend of his or something. And he said, yeah, if you're down to stay on the floor, like you can come crash with me. And I was like, okay, sick, that works.
I am moving to Hawaii.
So when I moved to Hawaii, he picked me up, and for that first month, we were homeless. We were sleeping on the floor of a church, and the only reason we were not on the streets is because that church was generous enough to allow us to sleep on the floor. But I didn't have any money. I had $2,000, which I spent half of it on a scooter the first day that I moved to Hawaii, and I had a camera that kind of worked a little bit, but I had a dream, and that's what matters. I had a dream to make some sort of filmmaking my actual career in reality. It wasn't that I wanted to make Instagram my reality. It was that I wanted to make a career in some sort of creative capacity. And at that point, all I knew was that I was working on a movie. Fast forward a few months, I had worked on movies, kind of on and off, 1 day here, 1 day there. And eventually I started to realize like I'm working 14-hour days. I'm not getting paid that much. I need to pay my rent. At this point, we had actually found a place to live. So I was no longer living on the floor, but I was only paying like $400 a month. And I was living with another dude in my room that was like a cracker box size because Hawaii is expensive, right? So we had to share rent and all this stuff. And I was still scraping by because I was not making much doing what I was doing. So I was like, I got to figure something else out. So I went and I got a job at a hotel being a bellman because that's something that I had done in college. And I was like, okay, listen, I'm going to have this job only until I can replace the income with something else. And to be honest, I only had that job for a week because I replaced the income with an online store that I built. And not that the income I was making was super high or anything like that, but I just needed to get out of that scenario because it was just kind of like mentally draining for me to feel like I had to show up at 5 a.m. to be there till 1 to just be working for somebody else. And that's just, nothing is bad with that, but I just personally found it very difficult for me to be able to do, especially when I knew that my passion was to be creative and to do something and to create something for myself. So while I was building up this little side business, I was also shooting pictures and posting to Instagram every single day. I was hyper consistent for like 2.5, 3 years of posting every single day. And this was like the prime time I consider of Instagram, like 2017, 18, 19. And at that point, it was much easier to grow a following. So because I was posting pictures every day, I started to get more and more eyeballs and more people looking. But the problem was, even though I was growing a following and I had 10, 20, 30,000 followers, I wasn't making any money off of that because I had no idea what I was doing. I was reaching out to brands, I was getting denied. I was reaching out to brands, no one would respond. Or I would get the free collab, right? Like they'd be like, yeah, we'll send you a free product, but like we don't really want to pay. And it was super difficult. Pretty much the only paid jobs I was getting were either super minimal or weddings. So weddings were kind of keeping me afloat there for a little while. So I'm kind of doing these jobs and I'm having a really tough time trying to find what'll work. But I'm like, okay, I know that I like to travel. I know that I like adventure. I know that I want to work with brands that are in that realm. So what is something I could do that would kind of, evoke that? And I knew I already lived in Hawaii and I was already shooting content there. I was like, if I go to somewhere like Southeast Asia, it's pretty cheap and I can probably start working with maybe some hotels out there or something like that. So that's what we decided to do. And I set up a trip with some friends. We go out to Bali and I reach out to all these different hotels and literally no one wants to work with me. Like no one wants to. I get 0 responses or just like that, hey, we're not interested. And I'm like, well, that sucks. What I did is we had to pay out of pocket, which Bali is super cheap, luckily. So we had to pay out of pocket for these different Airbnbs. I was like, well, if we're shooting at these Airbnbs, they're already really cool anyways, maybe I can start to get some content for a portfolio that I could then show some of these hotels like, hey, I actually know what I'm doing, right? So that's what I did. We stayed at 2 different Airbnbs and they were both super cool. And And I started shooting content of both of those to build on my portfolio. Now, the content, to be honest, looking back on it, was not that great, but it was something to get me started. And it was honestly my first stuff that I did of a resort type of feel. Now, during that trip, I actually had an opportunity from a friend that called me. It was like, hey, I was supposed to be in Bali. I was supposed to shoot this workshop for these guys. They're, big Instagram guys, and they need someone to shoot behind the scenes, but I can't be there. Would you be willing to step in? And it was literally a day's notice, like, hey, tomorrow you're going to do this. I was like, well, I'm already here. It could be a great opportunity for me. So sure, why not? So I went and I did the behind the scenes for 3 days for this Bali workshop where these guys that were pretty big on Instagram were teaching how they not only grew a following, but also how they started to work with brands and how they pitched themselves and how they edited and how they presented and how they priced themselves. And I've learned so much information just for free by shooting the behind the scenes of this workshop. And it was just like, honestly, kind of a godsend and like the greatest opportunity that I could have in terms of being able to learn how to actually do this stuff. Because although I went to film school, no one taught me how to make a business in the creative industry. So that was absolutely incredible. So I come back to Hawaii and now I have this new sense of, okay, that's how I actually reach out to brands. That's how I actually do this. So I started creating things like a media kit and pitch decks and all kinds of stuff and started reaching out to brands, and slowly but surely started to get some smaller brands on board that wanted to work with me. So fast forward to mid 2019. At this point, I had maybe, 60, 70,000 followers. I'm sitting on my bed just chilling and I get a DM on my phone and I look and it's from Royal Caribbean, which is insane. I've never gotten a DM from a brand that big. So I was absolutely stoked. I'm like, holy crap, Royal Caribbean is DMing me? What is this? So I open it up immediately and they're like, hey, we're doing a cruise to Bahamas next week. Are you down to jump on a call real quick? And I message them back immediately. I'm like, absolutely, I'm down. So we get on a call. They wanted to fly me out to Miami and then do a cruise to the Bahamas and do content creation for them and do a promotional video and all kinds of stuff. And I was like, this is sick. This is literally like a dream come true. I no longer have to rely on doing weddings. I no longer have to rely on just like making no money doing stuff, because they were actually going to pay me a decent wage to be able to do this. It's like, whoa, this is insane. I can actually do this. So I go out and I do the cruise and it was amazing. They loved the content and I was like, sick, this is great. How do I keep it going? How do I get the next gig and the next gig and the next gig? And just as I kind of start to see it start to come together, this happens. My car was broken into, my entire camera bag with all my gear, my drone, my lenses. I think I had 2 lenses at the house, but pretty much everything was completely stolen. I did not have the right insurance and there was no sort of tracking on it. So basically it was a complete loss. About $10,000 worth of gear, which was my entire life savings worth of gear, down the drain. And I thought my life was ruined. I thought my career was ruined. I thought I'd have to move back home. I thought I'd have to live with my parents. And luckily none of those things actually happened. But it was a massive learning experience because I now learned that I cannot keep my gear in a car because people will bust a window and just steal it. So that was a huge learning experience. But luckily, over the course of 2019, I started slowly but surely getting more travel jobs. So I worked with like Tourism Board of Sri Lanka. I worked with the Westin. I worked with a few other travel brands that allowed me to sort of start to build that income base that I could actually afford to buy new gear and be smarter on how I handled it. So that was great. So I started thinking, well, now that I've worked with Royal Caribbean, I've worked with Westin, I've worked with a tourism board, why couldn't I just go out and start pitching myself to some of these big companies? Because obviously the ones that have worked with me already had a good experience. So why don't I do that using the skills that I learned in that workshop? So I started to do that. And I started pitching myself to different resorts and different brands and bigger companies. I no longer kind of limited myself to the really small fry people. I started to reach out to the bigger ones. And lo and behold, some of them actually wanted to work with me. And I was absolutely shocked. I was like, I thought I would have to be doing this for like 10 years before somebody like Adobe would want to work for me, or before somebody like the Marriott would want to work with me. And that just wasn't the case, which was amazing. It was mind-blowing for me at that point. So I just kept doing it. I just kept reaching out, kept getting different jobs. And at this point, I was still posting every single day and I was still getting some inbound leads from Instagram, which was amazing. All the way up to now, I mean, I'm sitting in this amazing resort, the New York MGM hotel, just going to the pool and shooting content for them that they are going to use for their marketing assets and getting paid a full-time wage doing this. It's like still kind of mind-boggling to me that this is even a reality. But the truth is, I'm not any better than anybody else. Like I just told my entire story of like, I'm the guy that was just blessed enough to sleep on the floor of a church. Like if I didn't have that, I would be sleeping on the street, you know, but I took a risk, and all the way up to the point of where I am now, you know, in this hotel room So the whole point of me saying this story and the whole point of me being vulnerable here is that you can do it too. And it's not just a matter of skills or like, you know, how well you can edit or how well you can shoot or even how well you can pitch yourself, but more so, how tenacious are you? What will you do to make it happen? How consistent will you be? If somebody steals your gear, are you going to use that as an excuse to quit? If you have an opportunity to ask you to fly out and to pay your own wage, but it's going to allow you to build your portfolio so you can then get paid a full-time wage later on, are you going to take it? Or are you going to say, no, I'm not going to do that because I need to get paid this much because I'm worth that much, right? So it's like, what are you willing to do to make your dream a reality? I hope this story has inspired you to go chase after your dream and to go see like, hey, you know, this is not just overnight success. It's not just like, you know, you post on Instagram a few times and like all of a sudden you blow up and you're huge and like now you can work with these big brands. I mean, maybe for some people that's the case, but it wasn't the case for me, and it's not the case for most people. That being said, if you're interested in fast tracking this and not having to go through the point of being almost homeless and being almost broke and not knowing what's going on and all that stuff, right? If you want to fast track that and actually have a system that you can just follow from somebody who's doing it currently, then check out the link in the description below, because I got a free training that teaches exactly that. It teaches the 4-step system that I use to go from absolutely nothing, zero, or, you know, whatever you're at right now, to making a full-time multi-6-figure living, shooting for brands, resorts, travel companies, whatever it might be. So if that's you, I invite you to check out that link in the description below and join that free training. Now, if that's not you, that's totally fine. If you're just stopping by, if you just want to be inspired, I hope that did that for you. And if you liked the video, go ahead and leave a like, because it'll help not only me, but it'll help other creators like yourself be able to see this video and hopefully impact their life for the better. Also, if you like content like this, I have much more tactical stuff as well on my channel. So definitely make sure to check that out, because we have videos about how to pitch, how to create offers, like all kinds of different stuff. You're definitely going to want to check that out. So make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.